around a bend, and I lit out after it. I was well ahead of Lem Campbell when I overtaken it. I pulled up beside it in a cloud of dust and demanded, "You say that stuff cures man or beast?" "Absolutely," declared Latimer. "Well, turn around and head for Gallego," I said. "I got you a patient." "But Gallego is but a small island village," he demurs. "There's a railroad and many saloons at High Horse, and with a human reason at stake, you sets and maunders about railroads," I roared, drawing a .45 and impulsively shooting a few buttons off his coat. "I buys your whole load of loco liquor. Turn around and head for Gallego." "I wouldn't think of arguing," says he, turning pale. "Meshack, don't you hear the gentleman? Get out from under that seat and turn these hosses around." "Yes, sir," says Meshack, and they swung round just as Lem Campbell galloped up. I hauled out the wad old man Mulholland gimme and says to him, "Take this dough on to High Horse and buy some grub, and have it sent out to old man Mulholland's cow camp on the Little Yankton. I'm going to Gallego, and I'll need the wagon to lug Cousin Bearfield in." "I'll take the grub out myself," he declared, grabbing the wad. "I knowed I could depend on you as soon as I seen you." So he told me how to get to his cabin, then lit out for High Horse, and I headed back up the trail. When I passed the buggy, I hollered, "Foller me into Gallego. One of you drive the chuck wagon which is standing at the forks, and don't try to shake me as soon as I get out of sight, neither." "I wouldn't think of such a thing," says Latimer with a slight shudder. "Go ahead, and fear not. We'll follow you as fast as we can." So I dusted the trail for Gallego. It weren't much of a town, only just one saloon, and as I rode in I heard a beller in the saloon and the door flew open and 3 or 4 fellas come sailing out on their heads and picked theirselves up and tore out up the street. "Yeah," I says to myself, "Cousin Bearfield's in town all right." Gallego looked about like any town does when Bearfield is celebrating. The stores had their doors locked and the shutters up. Nobody was on the streets. And off down across the flat I seen a man which I taken to be the sheriff spurring his hoss for the hills. I tied Captain Kidd to the hitch rail, and as I approached the saloon I nearly fell over a feller which was crawling around on his all fours with a bartender's apron on and both eyes swelled shut. "Don't shoot," says he. "I give up." "What happened?" I asked. "The last thing I remember was telling a feller named Buckner that the Democratic platform was silly," says he. "Then I think the roof must have fell in or something. Surely one man couldn't have did all of this to me." "You don't know my cousin Bearfield," I assured him as I stepped over him and went through the door, which was tore off its hinges. I'd begun to think that maybe Lem Campbell had exaggerated about Bearfield. He seemed to be acting in just his ordinary normal manner. But an instant later I changed my mind. Bearfield was standing at the bar in solitary grandeur, pouring himself a drink, and he was wearing the damnedest looking red, yaller, green, and purple shirt ever I seen in my life. "What," I demanded in horror, "is that thing you got on?" "If you're referring to my shirt," he retorted with irritation, "it's the classiest piece of goods I could find in Denver. I bought it special for my wedding." "It's true," I moaned. "He's crazy as hell." "I know no sane man would wear a shirt like that." "What's crazy about getting married?" he snarled, biting the neck off of a bottle and taking a big snort. "Folks does it every day." I walked round him cautious, sizing him up and down, which seemed to exasperate him considerable. "What the hell's the matter with you?" he roared, hitching his harness forward. "I got a good mind to—" "Be calm, Cousin Bearfield," I soothed him. "Who's this gal you imagine you're going to marry?" "I don't imagine nothing about it, you ignorant ape!" he retorts cantankerously. "Her name's Ann Wilkins and she lives in High Horse. I'm riding over there right away, and we gets hitched today." I shaken my head mournfully and says, "You must 'a' inherited this from your great granduncle Esau. Paps always said Esau's insanity might crop out in the Buckners again sometime. But don't worry. Esau was cured and voted a straight Democratic ticket the rest of his life. You can be cured too, Bearfield, and I'm here to do it. Come with me, Bearfield," I says, getting a good wrastling grip on his neck. "Consarn it!" says Cousin Bearfield, and went into action. We went to the floor together and started rolling in the general direction of the back door, and every time he comes up on top he'd bang my head against the floor, which soon became very irksome. However, about the 10th revolution I come up on top and pried my thumb out of his teeth, and said, "Bearfield, I don't want to have to use force with you, but—" "Oh!" That was on account of him kicking me in the back of the neck. My motives was of the loftiest, and they weren't no use in the saloon owner bellyaching the way he done afterwards. Was it my fault if Bearfield missed me with a 5-gallon demijohn and busted the mirror behind the bar? Could I help it if Bearfield wrecked the billiard table when I knocked him through it? As for the stove which got busted, all I got to say is that self-preservation is the first law of nature. If I hadn't hit Bearfield with the stove, he would have undoubtedly scrambled my features with that busted beer mug he was trying to use like brass knucks. I've heard maniacs fight awful, but I don't know as Bearfield fit any different than usual. He hadn't forgot his old trick of hooking his spur in my neck whilst we was rolling around on the floor, and when he knocked me down with the roulette wheel and started jumping on me with both feet, I thought for a minute I was going to weaken. But the shame of having a maniac in the family revived me, and I throwed him off and riz and tore up a section of the brass footrail and wrapped it round his head. Cousin Bearfield dropped the buoy he'd just drawed and collapsed. I wiped the blood off of my face and discovered I could still see out of one eye. I pried the brass rail off of Cousin Bearfield's head and dragged him out onto the porch by a hind leg, just as Professor Latimer drove up in his buggy. Meshack was behind him in the chuck wagon with the monkey, and his eyes was as big and white as saucers. "Where's the patient?" asked Latimer, and I said, "This here's him. Throw me a rope out of that wagon. We takes him to Lem Campbell's cabin where we can dose him till he recovers his reason." Quite a crowd gathered whilst I was tying him up, and I don't believe Cousin Bearfield had many friends in Gallego by the remarks they made. When I lifted his limp carcass up into the wagon, one of 'em asked me if I was a law, and when I replied I weren't, pretty short, he says to the crowd, "Why, hell then, boys, what's to keep us from paying Buckner back for all the lickings he's give us? I tell you, it's our chance. He's unconscious and tied up, and this here feller ain't no sheriff." "Get a rope!" howled somebody. "We'll hang 'em!" They begun to surge forwards, and Latimer and Meshack was so scared they couldn't hardly hold the lines. But I mounted my hoss and pulled my pistols, and says, "Meshack, swing that chuck wagon and head south. Professor, you foller him. Hey, you, get away from them mules!" One of the crowd had tried to grab their bridles and stop 'em, so I shot a heel off'n his boot, and he fell down hollering bloody murder. "Get out of the way!" I bellered, swinging my pistols on the crowd, and they give back in a hurry. "Get going!" I says, firing some shots under the mule's feet to encourage him. and the chuck wagon went out of